The crack of a leather belt against bare skin echoed through the small cabin on the outskirts of Promise Creek, Colorado. As 19-year-old Josephine Norris pressed herself against the rough-hewn wall, trying to make herself smaller against her father's rage. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke loose, sending sheets of rain hammering against the windows like desperate fists. It was 1878, and the mining town of Promise Creek had seen better days. The gold had played out years ago, leaving behind men like Frank Norris, men who drowned their disappointments in whiskey and took out their frustrations on whatever or whoever was closest at hand. "You think you're too good to serve drinks at Holloway's, girl?" Frank slurred, his face flushed with drink and anger. "Too high and mighty to earn your keep." He raised the belt again. Josephine, with her honey-colored hair falling loose from its pins and a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth, didn't cry out. She'd learned long ago that tears only fueled his rage. "Pa, please, Mr. Holloway. He don't just want me serving drinks. You know that." "Money's money," Frank roared, stumbling slightly as he advanced. Lightning flashed through the cabin's single window, illuminating the bare interior, the rickety table where empty bottles stood like silent witnesses. The broken chair Frank had smashed last month in another drunken fit, the small trunk that held Josephine's few possessions. "I'll find honest work," Josephine pleaded. "I can sew." Mrs. Peterson at the general store said. The belt whistled through the air, striking her shoulder. This time she couldn't suppress her cry of pain. "Worthless, just like your ma," Frank spat. "She run off and left me with nothing but a squalling brat. And now you won't even—" The cabin door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall, nearly tearing from its hinges. Wind and rain swirled into the room like an angry spirit, and in the doorway stood a tall figure, silhouetted against the storm. For a moment, no one moved. Then lightning flashed again, illuminating the stranger's face. He was young, perhaps 25, with rain-slicked dark hair beneath a sodden hat and piercing blue eyes that took in the scene before him with cold fury. "Mister," he said in a voice quiet enough to send chills down Josephine's spine, "I suggest you put that belt down." Frank Norris spun around, nearly losing his balance. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my house." The stranger stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Water dripped from his long duster onto the floor. "Name's Owen Hawkins. Was passing through when I heard sounds no decent man should be making toward his kin." His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip. "Now, I'm asking politely, put the belt down." Frank's bloodshot eyes darted between Owen and the gun. With a snarl, he lunged forward, belt raised. Owen moved with surprising speed for a man of his size. He sidestepped Frank's clumsy attack, grabbed the older man's wrist, and twisted. Frank howled in pain as the belt dropped from his fingers. Before he could recover, Owen had him pinned against the wall, forearm pressed to his throat. "Listen careful, because I won't say this twice," Owen growled. "You touch that girl again and they'll find what's left of you scattered from here to Kansas." He pressed harder for a moment, then released Frank, who slid down the wall, gasping. Owen turned to Josephine, his expression softening. "You all right, miss?" Josephine nodded, though she was far from all right. Her shoulder throbbed where the belt had struck her, and old bruises mapped her arms like territories of pain. Yes, thank you." Frank struggled to his feet, face mottled with rage and humiliation. "She's my daughter. What I do with her is my business." "Not anymore," Owen said simply. He turned to Josephine. "Gather your things, you're leaving." "She ain't going nowhere." Frank lurched toward the rifle leaning in the corner. Owen's gun appeared in his hand so quickly it seemed like magic. "Don't." Frank froze, hatred burning in his eyes. "Miss," Owen said, not taking his eyes off Frank. "Your things." Josephine hesitated only a moment before rushing to the small trunk that contained everything she owned in the world. She threw in her mother's hairbrush, a faded daguerreotype, and the two dresses that weren't on her back. Her hands trembled as she closed the lid. "Ready," she whispered. Owen nodded, backing toward the door with his gun still trained on Frank. "Open the door and step outside." Josephine did as she was told, the rain immediately soaking her as she stepped into the night. Owen followed, keeping himself between her and the cabin until they reached his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently in the downpour. "Can you ride?" Owen asked, holstering his gun. "Yes." "Good." He secured her trunk behind the saddle, then mounted and extended his hand down to her. "Come on." Josephine glanced back at the cabin. Through the window she could see her father watching, his face a mask of drunken hatred. For a moment, a lifetime of fear held her rooted to the spot. Then she took Owen's hand and let him pull her up behind him. "Hold on tight," he said over his shoulder. Josephine hesitantly placed her hands on his waist. "Tighter than that, unless you want to fall off." She wrapped her arms around him then, feeling the solid warmth of him even through his wet clothes. Owen clicked his tongue, and the horse moved forward into the stormy night, away from the only home Josephine had ever known. The rain continued to pour as they rode through the darkness. Josephine pressed her face against Owen's back, sheltering from the worst of it. They hadn't spoken since leaving the cabin, but now Owen called over his shoulder. "There's a line shack about 2 miles ahead. We'll stop there till morning." Josephine just nodded, though she knew he couldn't see it. She was numb with cold and shock, the reality of what had just happened still sinking in. She'd fantasized about escaping her father for years, but never had she imagined it happening like this, riding through a thunderstorm with a stranger whose face she'd barely seen. The line shack materialized out of the darkness like a mirage, a small, sturdy structure built for cowboys working the range. Owen dismounted first, then helped Josephine down. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, and he caught her elbow to steady her. "Sorry," she murmured, embarrassed. "Nothing to be sorry for." His voice was gentler now. "Wait here while I check inside." He returned moments later and led her in. The shack was basic but dry, with a small pot-bellied stove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot. Owen lit a lantern hanging from a ceiling beam, casting warm light through the single room. "It's not much," he said, moving to the stove and beginning to build a fire, "but it's better than drowning out there." Josephine stood dripping by the door, suddenly acutely aware of her situation. She was alone in a remote cabin with a man she didn't know, a man who, despite his intervention, might have expectations of his own. As if reading her thoughts, Owen spoke without looking up from the stove. "You take the cot. I'll sleep on the floor." He got the fire going and straightened. "You should get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I'll step outside while you change." True to his word, Owen went back into the rain while Josephine quickly changed into her second dress. It was hardly dry itself, having been in the trunk that had been exposed to the elements, but it was better than what she'd been wearing. When Owen returned, he'd removed his duster and hat. Without them, he looked younger, his features more defined in the lantern light. He was handsome, she realized with a small shock, not in the flashy way of the gamblers who pass through town, but with a quiet strength that showed in the set of his jaw and the steadiness of his gaze. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for what you did back there. Most folks wouldn't have interfered." Owen hung his duster near the stove to dry. "Most folks should reconsider their priorities." He paused. "Has he been doing that a long time?" Josephine looked down at her hands. "Since Ma left, I was 8. A muscle jumped in Owen's jaw. "Where will you go now?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Josephine had no family, no money, and few prospects in a world that offered limited options for a young woman alone. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe Denver. I hear there's work there for girls who can sew." Owen nodded slowly. "I'm headed to Silverton myself. Got some business there. I can take you as far as the stage station in Durango." "Why are you helping me?" Josephine asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Owen was quiet for a long moment. "My sister," he finally said. "Our pa was like yours. By the time I was old enough to stand up to him, it was too late for her." He met Josephine's eyes. "No one helped her. I swore if I ever saw someone in the same situation, I wouldn't look away." The simple honesty in his words made Josephine's throat tight. "I'm sorry about your sister." "Get some rest," Owen said, changing the subject. "We've got a long ride tomorrow." Josephine lay down on the cot, pulling a rough blanket around her. She watched as Owen settled on the floor with his saddle as a pillow and his coat for a blanket. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but for the first time in years, Josephine fell asleep without fear. Morning brought clear skies and an awkward silence as they prepared to leave. In the light of day, the intensity of the previous night felt dreamlike. Owen was respectful but distant as he helped Josephine onto his horse and secured her trunk. "We should reach Durango by nightfall if we push hard," he said, mounting behind her. As they rode, Josephine found herself increasingly aware of Owen's presence, the solid strength of his chest against her back, the careful way he kept a proper distance despite their proximity. He was nothing like the rough men she'd known in Promise Creek. There was a gentleness to him that contradicted his imposing appearance. Around midday, they stopped by a clear stream to rest the horse and eat some jerky Owen had in his saddlebags. Sitting on a sun-warmed rock, Josephine found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "What business do you have in Silverton, Mr. Hawkins?" Owen looked up from adjusting the horse's saddle. "Just Owen is fine." He hesitated before answering. "I'm looking for someone, man named Clayton Pierce. A friend?" "No." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. They continued their journey through increasingly mountainous terrain. As the afternoon wore on, Josephine noticed Owen checking the sky with growing frequency. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Weather's changing. We might not make Durango before nightfall after all." He pointed to clouds building over the western peaks. "Mountain storms can come up fast." Sure enough, within an hour the temperature dropped and the wind picked up. Dark clouds rolled toward them with alarming speed. "There's a mining town called Broken Pine about 3 miles east," Owen said. "We need to get there before this hits." They pushed the horse harder, and soon a cluster of buildings appeared in a valley below them. Broken Pine was larger than Promise Creek, with a proper main street lined with businesses. Owen headed directly for a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Dollar Hotel. As they dismounted, the first fat raindrops began to fall. Owen grabbed Josephine's trunk and ushered her inside just as thunder rumbled overhead. The hotel lobby was small but clean, with a pot-bellied stove and several chairs scattered about. A thin man with spectacles looked up from behind the front desk. "Got a room available?" Owen asked, setting down the trunk. "Just the one," the clerk replied, eyeing them curiously. $1. Owen placed the money on the counter. "My sister and I need to stay the night." Josephine felt her cheeks flush at the lie but understood its necessity. A young, unmarried woman traveling alone with a man would invite gossip at best, trouble at worst. "Room 3, top of the stairs," the clerk said, handing over a key. The room was simple: a bed, a washstand, and a chair near the window. Owen set Josephine's trunk down and cleared his throat. "I'll sleep in the chair," he said. "You don't have to pretend I'm your sister when we're alone," Josephine said softly. Owen's expression remained neutral. It seemed the simplest explanation. He moved toward the door. I'm going to see to the horse and find us something to eat. Lock the door behind me. Alone, Josephine took the opportunity to wash her face and hands in the basin. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand startled her. She looked different somehow. The fear that had lived in her eyes for so long was diminished, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. Owen returned with a tray of food from the hotel's kitchen: beef stew, bread, and coffee. They ate in companionable silence as the storm raged outside. Afterward, Owen took the chair by the window, stretching his long legs out before him. "Tell me about yourself," Josephine said suddenly. "Where are you from?" Owen seemed surprised by the question. "Texas originally, been drifting since the war. You fought last year of it. I was young but old enough." His eyes took on a faraway look. "Saw things no one should see. Is that why you drift? Because of what you saw?" A small smile touched his lips. "You ask a lot of questions. Sorry, I don't mean to pry." "I don't mind." He studied her for a moment. "Truth is, I've been looking for something. Thought I'd find it in the next town or the one after that." He shrugged. "Still looking, I suppose. For what?" "Peace, maybe." He looked out the window at the rain. "Or purpose." There was something in his voice that made Josephine's heart ache. "I hope you find it." "What about you?" Owen asked. "What do you want now that you're free?" The question caught her off guard. For so long, her only wish had been escape. Beyond that, she'd hardly dared to dream. "A quiet life," she said finally. "Somewhere I don't have to be afraid." She twisted her hands in her lap. "Maybe someday a family that's nothing like the one I had." Owen nodded slowly. "You deserve that." Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared wounds and similar hopes. Josephine looked away first, suddenly flustered. "We should get some sleep," she said. "It's been a long day." She took the bed while Owen settled in the chair, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Despite her exhaustion, Josephine lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. They left Broken Pine early, continuing their journey toward Durango. The mountains rose majestically around them, valleys green with summer growth. For Josephine, who had rarely ventured beyond Promise Creek, the scenery was breathtaking. "It's beautiful," she said, unable to contain her wonder. "Yes, it is," Owen replied, but when she glanced back, she found him looking not at the landscape but at her. He quickly averted his gaze, focusing on the trail ahead. As they traveled, Josephine found herself telling Owen things she'd never told anyone about: her mother's abandonment, her father's descent into alcoholism, her dreams of a different life. Owen listened without judgment, occasionally sharing pieces of his own past in return. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge and saw Durango spread out in the valley below a proper town, with wooden sidewalks, brick buildings, and the gleaming rails of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad cutting through its center. "We made it," Owen said, but there was no triumph in his voice. At the stage station, Owen helped Josephine down from his horse and retrieved her trunk. The afternoon stage to Denver would depart in an hour. "Well," he said awkwardly, "I guess this is where we part ways." Josephine nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "Yes, I suppose it is." Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out several folded bills. "Take this. It's not much, but it'll help you get settled." Pride made her want to refuse, but practicality won out. "Thank you for everything." He shuffled his feet, looking anywhere but at her. "You'll be all right in Denver. You're stronger than you know." "And you'll find Clayton Pierce in Silverton?" she asked. A shadow crossed Owen's face. "Yes." "What will you do when you find him?" Owen's jaw tightened. "What needs doing?" Something in his tone made Josephine's blood run cold. Owen, who is he? What did he do? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, he killed my sister. After she ran away from our father, she ended up working in his saloon in Deadwood when she tried to leave. His voice trailed off. You're going to kill him, Josephine said. It wasn't a question. He's had it coming for 3 years. And then what? Owen frowned. What do you mean, after you kill him? What then? More drifting, more looking for something you'll never find. She stepped closer. You saved me from one kind of prison. Don't put yourself in another. It's not that simple. It could be. Josephine surprised herself with her boldness. Come to Denver with me. Owen's eyes widened. Josephine, or I'll go to Silverton with you. No. His response was immediate. That's not happening. Why not? You said yourself I'm stronger than I know. This isn't about strength. His voice softened. This is about me not wanting you anywhere near the ugliness that's waiting at the end of my trail. Josephine felt tears threatening. So you'll just walk away, after everything? Owen looked pained. It's better this way for you. Don't I get a say in what's better for me? She wiped angrily at a tear that escaped despite her efforts. All my life, men have been deciding what's best for me. My father, Mr. Holloway, now you. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. She took a deep breath. 2 days ago, I was trapped. Now I'm free, and the first thing I want to do with that freedom is choose for myself. And I choose you, Owen Hawkins, whether you're headed to Silverton or Denver or the moon. Owen stared at her, conflict evident in his eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you rode through a storm to help someone you'd never met. I know you treated me with respect when you had every opportunity not to. I know there's goodness in you that runs deeper than whatever darkness you're chasing. She reached for his hand. And I know that walking away from you now would be the biggest mistake of my life. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Owen's fingers closed around hers. Josephine, he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering. She squeezed his hand. Let me help you find peace, not through vengeance, but through letting go. Owen's free hand came up to touch her cheek, so gently it made her heart ache. I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide, she whispered. The station master called out that the stage would be boarding in 20 minutes. Owen glanced toward the waiting coach, then back at Josephine. If we're going to make it to Denver, he said slowly, we should buy our tickets. Josephine's breath caught. Denver, not Silverton. Pierce has waited 3 years. He can wait longer. Owen's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Maybe forever. Are you sure? No, he admitted with a small smile, but I'm willing to find out. He grew serious again. I can't promise it will be easy. I've been carrying this hatred a long time. I don't need easy, Josephine said. I just need you. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Then Owen bent his head and kissed her, softly at first, then with growing certainty. Josephine felt herself melting into him, the rest of the world falling away. When they finally pulled apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I never expected you, he murmured. Neither did I, she replied, smiling through tears of joy. They boarded the stage to Denver together, Josephine's trunk secured on top, Owen's horse sold to a local rancher. As the coach pulled away from Durango, Josephine looked out the window at the mountains they were leaving behind. What are you thinking? Owen asked, his fingers entwined with hers. That I'm not afraid anymore, she answered honestly. Owen's eyes, clear and blue as a Colorado sky, held promises she'd never dared to dream of. Neither am I, he said. And as the stage rolled northward, carrying them toward a future neither could have imagined 3 days ago, Josephine knew that the storm that had brought them together had cleared more than just the skies. It had washed away old wounds and made room for something new to grow in their place. Something beautiful and strong and, most miraculous of all, entirely their own. 6 months later, Owen stood at the altar of a small church in Denver, watching as Josephine walked toward him in a simple white dress, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. The bruises had long since faded from her skin and the shadows from her eyes. In their place was a quiet confidence that took his breath away. They'd built a life together piece by piece, Owen finding work with a cattle company, Josephine establishing herself as a seamstress whose fine stitching was becoming known throughout the growing city. They'd rented a small house on the outskirts of town, with a view of the mountains and enough land for a garden that Josephine tended with joyful determination. There had been difficult moments, nights when Owen woke sweating from dreams of war and vengeance. Days when a harsh word or sudden movement would make Josephine flinch before she remembered she was safe. But they weathered these storms together, each helping the other heal. And now, as Josephine reached him and placed her hand in his, Owen knew with absolute certainty that riding through that storm to her cabin had been the most important journey of his life. Not because he had saved her, but because, in doing so, she had saved him right back. "I love you," he whispered as the minister began to speak. Josephine's smile was radiant. "I love you too," she replied, "now and always." And in that moment, surrounded by the handful of friends they'd made in their new life, Owen and Josephine Hawkins found what they'd both been searching for all along, not just peace or safety, but home in each other's hearts.